This Friday, I had a chance to see 3 movies at my local cinema. I saw one film with a bad premise but good execution, another with a good premise but with bad execution, and a third that was lukewarm all around. Let's get started and talk about a couple of these movies. The first one was one I've been curious for a while. That film was Ma. Directed by Tate Taylor, known for his film The Help. Yes, really, The Help. Ma is a Blumhouse action thriller horror film that has taken the cinema world by storm. Trailers for Ma floated around the internet for months, so often and for so long that I genuinely thought the film came out months ago and I had just missed it. Pictures of some unique camera work from Ma floated around social media after the trailers were posted, and word about Ma's possible success tantalized those seeking an underdog. For many, the draw of Ma as the lead, Octavia Spencer. Often typecast as a maid, cleaner, or sassy friend, Spencer sees a unique role in Ma as a creepy but endearing killer. It may not be anything special in the genre, but for the actor, it's quite amazing. In fact, the best part of the film is Spencer's performance. I don't know how she does it, but an awful plot and a terrible script become extremely genuine when she takes the role. Her on-screen presence is as good as always, and I was pleasantly surprised at how she turned a cliche role into something interesting. Moments where you'd often gawk at poor writing become unnervingly off-putting. You know the script is bad, you know the rest of the cast is dreadful, and you know this is Blumhouse. But the presence of Spencer and the perfection of her delivery is scary, given the film's greater context. This is a bad movie, don't get me wrong, but having the killer be a great performer creates an uncanny valley of absurdity. One problem that often plagues Blumhouse movies is certainly the fact that the cast is much worse than the plot. You can take a good idea, but you're always bogged down by terrible acting. In this case, you don't get that, because you're given an Oscar-winning performer to perform a role not really suited for her, but one that she was able to transform as her own. Actors in Blumhouse movies are often kids, new actors, cheap actors, so on and so forth, but Tate Taylor very clearly knew that Octavia Spencer, someone who he'd worked with before, was perfect for a role outside of her comfort zone, and her acting prowess allowed her to expand that role into something that you would never expect her to take on by herself. In short, Ma details a revenge plot in which Sue-Ann, or Ma as the kids call her, takes revenge on her high school classmates after an embarrassing event in her past. Not only does Sue-Ann target her classmates, but also their children. I was initially impressed that the main character, played by Diana Silvers, is a new kid without the unaccepted trait, and respected the decision to go against the beaten path of that plot line. However, once the revenge plot starts, the film dives deep into the cliches we know and love. What ensues is a predictable Blumhouse story with little deviation from the norm. Of course Ma murders some people, of course Ma tortures the main characters, of course Ma has a kid she keeps locked in her house because of her past trauma, of course Ma stalks all the kids on Facebook, of course the kids try to distance themselves from Ma, and of course she follows them. The predictability of the film is not unexpected, but disappointing nonetheless. As I mentioned before, the film does start with a new kid plot who is immediately accepted into society's culture. This isn't a film with the awkward new kid. This is completely opposite to that. It knows that it can't waste time, sadly, when getting into the more horror aspects of the movie, or getting into the quote-unquote mythology behind Ma. The film starts to drag, because it dips deep into those horror cliches. It seems like Tate Taylor was more interested on recreating what he believed was a horror movie, not really creating a good movie on its own, because things dive deep into the Blumhouse cliche. Maybe he was looking for advice on how to make a horror movie, because this seems to be his horror debut. There's an underlying thread of the film that clearly should have received more attention, as it never comes to fruition and actively works against the actions of the protagonist. It's revealed that Ma has a daughter, Jeannie, who she purposefully incapacitates so she can't leave the house, or at least that's the impression that I got watching the movie. The crew discovers Jeannie wants to escape, Jeannie is the one to save the crew from Ma in the climax. You get the general idea. Even having not seen this movie, you can predict a lot of this stuff is going to happen. Clearly, the film is attempting to show that the sins of the Ma are not the sins of the daughter. Ma is trying to hurt the children of the popular people that bullied her, and the film uses Jeannie to show that we aren't defined by the actions of our parents. The child of the bad can turn out to be good. This leads to a problem, however. At some point in the film, Ma murders 2 of her bullies, believing that they hurt her so badly that her revenge is now justified. The moment where Ma attaches a man to a dog's blood bag, touches him quite tenderly, and proceeds to murder him is presented as the turning point of her character. Ma is no longer the odd woman, she's become a psychopath, and a mentally tortured one at that. When Jeannie draws the final moral of the story, it seems to defend Ma's previous murders as justified revenge, and puts the torture of her child as the wrongdoing, and the children of the popular people. The children don't deserve it, but the sins fall in the hands of their parents. In fact, given the context, the parents are by far the least likable characters in the film. You're supposed to sympathize with Diana Silvers' mom, but given the emotional torment she placed on another innocent student, you almost want to see them in pain. This seems unintentional, as it's clear the director wanted to make Ma the pure villain. If presented in a different way, the film could have justified the actions of the killer and allowed for a more dynamic performance by Spencer. However, the film misses this mark, and what could have been an interesting dynamic in which kids have to separate the love for their parents from the justice they deserve becomes a rather bland story of revenge. To re-clarify, Ma murders people who she believes did something wrong to her. The film only presents the torture of the children as wrong, as the children technically did nothing wrong. Yet the parents are supposed to be sympathetic figures, or at least Diana Silvers' mom should be a sympathetic figure to the audience. There's this blending of morals that doesn't quite work, and it gives this uncanny valley of uncertainty. You're not sure whether you should want Diana Silvers' mom killed, just as you didn't want the other two parents killed. All you understand really is that the film says that the kids shouldn't be hurt, maybe the parents, maybe not. Ma isn't an original movie, nor is it a good one. It reminded me of Sony's Slender Man film, but less reliant on jump scares with the same caliber of teen acting. Blumhouse's thrillers market themselves as horror, and that's a genuine lie. Let me just get that clear. Ma is not a horror film. There are a couple jump scares, and there are some pretty grotesque scenes of torture, but the film is about as scary as The Gift, another Blumhouse thriller. It's a closed-box movie focusing on a couple of characters and an oddball. It's like The Psycho Killer, but even less reliant on that. The film feels like a drama. It feels like a 90s drama. It doesn't feel like a horror, and it's almost infuriating that they've tried to market it as a horror to trick people to go see it. Nothing is scary, and if you enter this movie looking for scares, you're going to be on the edge of your seat waiting for something to happen for the entire runtime. The film exceeds on Spencer's acting. The film is held by the actors. She carries the film, and I wish her horror debut would have been something and a bit more interesting. If you're looking for a fantastic character actor handling a lukewarm role, or you want a taste of some rare full-frontal male nudity, you can check out Ma. Those two things were by far the most surprising aspects of the movie for me. The fact that there was a full-frontal male nudity shot, and that Octavia Spencer does a fantastic job in this role. The script is awful, so she's working as well as she can with what she's given, but her presence on the screen, the way she delivers her lines, are oddly really good. It almost feels like the horror aspect of the movie is recognizing that the rest of the film is bad compared to one person's acting. It's a fun night at the movies, to say the least, if you're willing to be a little disappointed. Ma isn't going to deliver the scares that people expect it to, but it's going to deliver some surprises. The rest of the movie is downright terrible. The plot is inconsistent, the morals are inconsistent, the theming is inconsistent, it's visually bland, the plot essentially repeats itself over and over again, but there's a couple of things to enjoy here. I can't necessarily blame anyone who wants to see it. Ma gets a 5 out of 10. Immediately after seeing Ma, I hopped on my AMC app and booked another film. I'm definitely not a horror buff, as I get scared very easily, especially in the theaters, but Ma didn't satiate my need for a jump scare or two. The concept of this next one seemed like an interesting one months ago, when it was initially announced, but a less than stellar response by audiences had me curious as to why this film failed. This is Brightburn. Brightburn is proof that a good idea doesn't always translate to a good film. While the concept seemed interesting at first, and the genre had promised to be adapted to a superhero movie, the follow-through ruined the film and prevented me from fully appreciating the idea behind the mess. Directed by David Yarovesky, Brightburn follows the classic tale of Superman told from a different perspective, or at least in a different parallelish universe. A meteor lands in Brightburn, Kansas, and it is the child that a family adopts of their own that becomes the villain. Just like Superman was the hero in that film, the child is the villain in this one. Instead of growing up to be a superhero, which would parallel the Superman story directly, the child realizes his destiny is not to save the world, but to take it over. With infinite power, the child can use the tools given to him to take over the Earth and hurt the people who've acted against him. In the Superman story, Clark follows in line of his loving mother and honorable father, but this film offers a contrast where his parents quickly realize that they were wrong to play God and must kill the child they raised. Did they raise him wrong? And are they at fault for being inexperienced parents unable to care for such a volatile child? These questions are never answered. Brightburn fails in this regard as the natural progression of character takes a backseat to simple scares known by the prevalent Sony brand of horror. I certainly understand how this could work as a horror film, but much of the film was jump scare ridden dark moments where we desperately needed some kind of character development. Though the writing was rather dismal throughout the film, I certainly understood the plight of the two parents. They were in pain as they had to accept this child as their own, but also understand that it was an unstoppable killing machine, not native to this earth and not really theirs. Sadly, this development was not allocated to other characters, and even the villain, played by Jackson A. Dunn, or the kid who's on all the posters, failed to show a consistent theme of internal conflict. We were given tastes of his difficulty coming to terms with killing, but they were in isolated lines of dialogue. Sometimes he would be sad his parents betrayed him, or be sad that he was hurting people, while at other times he would be 100% steadfast to the killing of innocents. These came randomly, and the character suffers for this. The film kind of goes into maybe him being a socially awkward pariah. What if Superman wasn't as accepted? He was a weirdo, but he also was awkward, and no one really talked to him. This was something the movie could have explored, but it chose not to. The character would flip-flop depending on what needed to scare. If director Yarovesky wanted to present a scare in this scene, then he would be really confident, he'd be really sure of his powers. But if he wanted to present an emotional scene, he would always skip around. He would always make sure that the kid was insecure about his powers, was insecure about whether he was a bad guy or a good guy. This changed every so often, and it didn't feel like a natural progression of character. It felt like simplicity in the writing that lended itself well to certain plot points and cliches. If I may sidetrack for a second, I'd like to talk about the ending of the film. The film concludes with Dunn killing both of his parents as they tried to kill him first. They recognized that he was an evil person, an evil kid, not the one they loved. Maybe they failed his parents, maybe they didn't, and they both attempted to murder him. And then, Dunn kills them, essentially escapes scot-free. The world is confused as to what this supernatural menace could mean, as there are certain events that have happened towards the end of the film that can't necessarily be explained with normal purposes. And the credits cut to a literal InfoWars parody, with the character The Big T played by Michael Rooker. Here, Michael Rooker tells the audience that they've noticed strange seaman killing people off the coast, which is clearly Aquaman, and crazy women strangling people with a lasso somewhere else, which is, of course, parallel to Wonder Woman. This is obviously a joke, as it's supposed to reference other superheroes, other people in the Justice League, and how we can view superheroes in a different light besides the savior light. And it's presented as truth. Remember, though, this is on the website Infobomb, so it is a direct parallel to Alex Jones's website, and the conspiracies are supposed to be a clever tie-in to true things in the universe. This is not a random conspiracy theorist. This is a conspiracy theorist meant to be linked to Alex Jones in the mind of the audience, but delivers true information meant as Easter eggs. Please, before you connect InfoWars and use it as a pivotal moment of cliche Easter eggs, recognize that their conspiracy theories are not monsters, they are the possibility of school shootings being fake. You cannot present this website in a good light, especially when you're trying to validate conspiracy theories within a universe. When you deliver it as a crux of storytelling, as this film does, you give validity to a website that you do not want to support. It is definitely an accident, but they treat InfoWars like just another conspiracy website, and not as one that wholly puts forward conspiracies that are disgusting. Plot is predictable and offered none of the complexities I would have hoped for in a film with this concept. During puberty, Brandon Breyer begins to hear voices and discovers the meteor he came to Earth in. Parents are desperate to stop this, as they know they'd lose their son if he found this extraterrestrial ship and recognized his past. Upon learning about his life, Brandon believes his calling is to destroy the world, hurt people who wrong him, and distance himself from the world around him. As an analogy for puberty and social awkwardness, this could have worked really well, but placing a heavier emphasis on character dynamics instead of poorly shot jump scenes would have allowed for a deeper dive into the psychosis of Superman, but the director's intentions were clearly in another direction. Again, I don't even know why this was a horror film. Nothing quite lends itself to horror in the concept, besides the fact that he's an evil kid. Yes, the kills were gruesome, and Brandon's speed allowed for some visually interesting scares, but never did I feel like the horror allowed for necessary character development. You very easily could have made a film in which Clark Kent grew up evil, but horror is a demanding genre. The reason why most horror sucks is because a lot of the runtime has to be set up and pay off for jump scares. This isn't to say that you can't make a scary film without them. My favorite film, Alien, has barely any jump scares. But modern horror is demanding in its setup because of its reliance on jump scares and musical stings. Performances by David Denman and Elizabeth Banks, Brandon's parents, were okay, but the faults can certainly be blamed on scriptwriters Marc and Brian Gunn. These two characters, who were supposed to be the genuine parents grounding the film in reality, felt stilted and downright awful. There were points where they were more inhuman than their child, and that was clearly not the intent. Sadly, even being related to director James Gunn can't make you write well. There are good things about Brightburn. The actors were competent, and the concept was initially interesting. Despite being cliché with a heavy use of jump scare and musical stings, the film visually delivers in numerous instances. I was disappointed in Brightburn, not because I expected perfection, but because the film didn't deliver on the premise I was promised. It was wasted potential. This seemed less like an interesting take on Superman, and more like an excuse to do a horror movie based on the character or the genre. I feel like the director wanted to make a horror version of Superman, and accidentally gave the impression that they would create an interesting character dissection of one of America's icons. 4 out of 10. Finally, to close off the night, I hopped over to the Dolby Cinema at AMC to catch the latest installment of one of Legendary's biggest franchises. The first one was pretty bad, but the second film in the universe is a favorite of mine, a classic B-movie, and I was hoping to see where the series would go next. A lot of faith was placed in this summer blockbuster, and I was certain it would pay off. Godzilla, King of the Monsters, is the second film in the Godzilla series by Legendary, and the third entry in the MonsterVerse shared universe. Certainly not the most artful of films, the modern Godzilla movies have been bogged down with awful characters and a heavy focus on human melodrama. Where audiences find the monster fighting palatable enough, critics note the opposite about the film, saying that the humans are not the focus when compared to an abundance of monsters. Is this really the case? No. The film still places a heavy emphasis on human reactions to the monsters and uses kaiju fights as backgrounds for human conflict instead of giving them the complete focus. Sadly, the critics get their opinions mostly from the fact that the humans they're focusing on are 2D, shapeless, and a waste of time. The film excels when you direct the camera to the monsters, as the director clearly understands how to turn these CGI creatures into destructive forces with clear motivations. King Ghidorah comes off like a smarmy asshole, and Godzilla, the honorable king of Earth, is there to protect his throne. It's clear that in their actions, these kaiju have character, and these are retained throughout the film. King Ghidorah isn't just some lizard monster, but an arrogant, laughing, cackling pain trying to conquer the kingdom of Godzilla and the Earth itself. Forcing a bland human plot into the film, especially one that is as shallow as a kiddie pool, only ruins the pacing of what could be an all-out CGI spectacular. The original Godzilla tries to tackle the effects of nuclear war by using Godzilla as a metaphor, and any other human story is almost always a failure. Given the script, the cast of the film is passable. Millie Bobby Brown is alright, Bradley Whitford delivers a well-done comedy role, and Charles Dance plays Charles Dance. Lead actor Kyle Chandler holds the main role decently, but kinda seeps into the background just on how bland he is. Special props must be given to Ken Watanabe, who, yet again, steals the show to near perfection. He's an endearing actor, and the film's foolish choice to kill his character made me disinterested in future films. When the film gives into the kaiju fetish of its audience, it does so rather well. I got to see the film in a Dolby theater, and the shaking sets and booming bass certainly added to the experience. This is probably a movie you want to experience in the theaters unless you have a high-quality surround system at home. Punches have weight, and there's rarely a dull moment. Sadly, the other two movies in the cinematic universe had qualities that far exceeded this film's peaks. 2014's Godzilla had some awful casting and writing, but the idea to hide the monsters throughout the film is pretty genius. Holding back Godzilla as a terror was a bit disappointing to those looking for a monster flick, and maintained some of the emotional draw behind fearing the gargantuan beast. This film treats Godzilla as a celebrity, rather than as a monster to be feared. Being as cartoony as this film comes with a consequence, that being the original vision of the monster. The 1954 film treats him as Gareth Edwards did, but the current direction is to move more towards the original sequel films, cheap fighting movies about monsters. On the other hand, Jordan Vogt-Roberts delivered a fantastic B-movie with Kong Skull Island. A stylized war drama with a giant ape was the perfect blend of kaiju and grittiness without losing the direction of the original. Vogt-Roberts made a fantastic film in the universe, something Daughtry could not. Here's the kicker. This isn't a movie with a heavier focus on the monsters compared to 2014. What it is a film with equal focus as 2014's Godzilla, but on bad characters. So bad that they are 2D cliches that the audience would rather ignore. If we could pivot the camera towards the cast or the monsters, the choice is clear. The film wasn't perfect, but it gave me an adequate time at the theaters. If you're looking for something fun, Godzilla King of the Monsters is pretty good for that. 7 out of 10.